Let's talk about Palworld. First of all, I'm just going to put the trailer for Palworld up here so you can watch it while I introduce myself. Since it's possible this video might do a little bit better than my average video, I'll let you know who I am. My name is Darrah. I worked from BioWare from 1997 till 2021, working on titles such as Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and the Dragon Age series. These days, I do consulting with game companies to help them get their teams in order and help them ship games. If you're new to this channel, we mostly talk about video game development and processes. Full disclosure, I do not own Palworld. I do not intend on buying Palworld. We'll talk about why at the end of this video. Have you figured out, as I've been talking, what this game actually is based upon the trailer? You'd certainly be forgiven if you said it's a Pokemon game or a Pokemon clone, because that's what the trailer is very strongly evoking. And there is some of that in this game, but this game shares a lot more with a game like Ark Survival Evolved than it does with Pokemon. It's ultimately a survival builder where you collect resources and build things in order to survive in the world. It has pals or Pokemon as one of their gameplay aspects. But when you look at the trailer, you notice that it's very strongly emphasizing the Pokemon. It does have those other aspects in the trailer, but the balance isn't really in line with the actual balance of gameplay as I understand it in the game. One of the things that got Palworld into the discourse was this accusation that it is using AI content generation to make its pals. Do I think it's using AI content generation? I do not. The AI isn't up to the task of creating the 3D assets that this game is using for its pals, at least not yet. It's possible that they are using AI generation to generate concept art in order to provide inspiration for their pals, but I don't think that's what's actually going on either. So what I think is happening is actually fairly simple. I think Palworld is simply using Pokemon as reference material. Maybe they're using one of those Pokemon mix and match generators to generate their Pokemon, but basically they're starting with a piece of Pokemon concept art or a screenshot from a Pokemon game or a frame from one of the animes, and they're using that as the basis for their PAL designs. I don't think it really goes much further than that. I don't think it's AI generation. I don't think it's theft. I think it's basically tracing. I have this IGN article comparing different Palworld pals to Pokemon, and I'm just gonna sort of scroll up it. I'm not gonna probably refer to anything too specifically, but you do see a striking similarity with a lot of these creatures. Some of them maybe just inspired by, some of them might be very surprised not to learn that they were essentially just attempting to duplicate the Pokemon reference. But that's where I think it begins and ends. I don't think this is AI generation, because I think if it was AI generation, to be frank, I think it would actually be less similar than what we're actually seeing. I also don't think probably this is using direct asset lifts out of a Pokemon game, despite some of the things that you've seen on the internet comparing the models over top of each other. I think what's more likely to be happening here is that they are using Pokemon as reference material, and then they are using a tool like ZBrush to essentially paint over that reference material to generate a 3D model from that reference material. Now, I think some of these ones up here near the top, they may also be directly duplicating some of the texturing in order to get those specific facial expressions, which are probably just painted on. They're very unlikely to be modeled in there. To be honest, that's the place where I think it looks the most like you are directly copying from Pokemon. The models probably generated in ZBrush by painting over. Definitely, if Nintendo can prove that they've stolen actual assets, if the vertices are identical, then there is a case to be made there. But chances are it's just a copy job as opposed to a actual theft. But when you see those places where you have the Snorlax smile and the Meowth face, that's a little bit more on the nose from my perspective. Again, probably not an asset directly lifted, probably not AI. So if it's not AI generated, is it close enough to be copyright violation? I'm going to caveat this entire section by saying this is not legal advice and I'm not a lawyer, so take all of this with a grain of salt. My instinct is that none of this is close enough to be considered an actual violation of copyright. Except in the instances where the models are super duper close. And even in that case, you would have to show that these were actually models that were copied, as opposed to just some sort of convergent evolution where by making something with the same shape, you ended up with the same model. If you laid the two models on top of each other and they had identical vertices, I think you'd probably have a case there. But if it just so happened that you ended up with two models with basically the same shape, I'm still not sure that you would be able to win that case in a court of law. So I think we're in the land of legally distinct, not Pokemon, that probably there isn't a copyright case to be had here. But I do think that when we're talking about copyright, it's worth having a conversation about trademarks. So trademarks exist technically as a form of consumer protection. Trademarks are supposed to exist so that people don't get confused that this brand and this brand are the same brand. So a company can make a trademark case if they have a registered trademark and they feel that there is brand confusion being caused. Now, I'm pretty sure that Nintendo only has Pikachu actually trademarked, so I don't know that there is a legal place for Nintendo to stand here either, but ask yourself if there is brand confusion being created here, and I think that there might actually be. Probably not enough to make a legal case, but still something to think about. And the argument that I would make is not only is there a very close, potentially confusing connection to the Pokemon world and the Pokemon brand, I would say that Palworld is directly, intentionally evoking that comparison. If you actually look at some of the assets in this trailer, such as their Team Rocket analog here, I would say that even though this doesn't look that much like Team Rocket, they are definitely trying to make you feel like this is Team Rocket. They are definitely trying to draw upon that brand goodwill when they are doing their marketing. You can, of course, argue that this kind of enemy introduction isn't unique to the Pokemon anime, which of course is true. But again, given the circumstances, given the context that this is being presented, I think it's pretty hard to argue that they're not trying to evoke that Team Rocket intro sequence. So is there a legal case here to be made for trademark infringement? I don't think so. If you actually look at the Pikachu analog, it's actually one of the least similar ones, I would say. Maybe intentionally so, because they know that there is a trademark there. But I think that we can have a conversation about what is being attempted, what the spirit of what's going on is, independent of the actual legalities of the situation. And one of the arguments that I've heard is Palworld is parody or Palworld is satire, and therefore it is fair use, and therefore there's no case here. First of all, like we just talked about, I don't actually think there's a case here anyway, but is Palworld parody? Well, we'll use Merriam-Webster. Their definition of parody is a literary work in the style of an author which is closely imitated for comic relief and or ridicule. I don't think that Palworld remotely qualifies as parody, mainly because Palworld is very earnest in its implementation of the world. I think it is playing it straight. It's not comedy. It's not trying to hold up something for ridicule. Therefore, I don't think that it is parody. Satire is literary work holding up human vices or follies to ridicule or scorn, usually to try to make a point about that topic or about some greater theme. So is Palworld satire? I don't think that it is, but there are two things that make me pause a little bit on being super definitive on this particular question. And those two things are, one, this official screenshot from the Steam page, which shows some very sad Pokemon building guns and assembly line. And two, the fact that you can Pokeball humans and put them to work in your factory. It is possible that Palworld is attempting a satirical discussion or examination of both the implications of the Pokemon world, of you're capturing these creatures and essentially forcing them to do work and fight on your behalf, and the nature of some of these survival builders that similarly have this kind of forced labor inherent in their structure. Do I think that's actually going on here? I don't think so. I think, as I said, that Palworld's playing it pretty straight. They are trying to make a fun survival builder that has these aspects. But those two things make me step back and think maybe they are attempting satire. If they are, then I think they are falling short from being obvious enough. Even a game like Spec Ops: The Line, one of the most effective pieces of video game satire, was misconstrued as playing it straight by a lot of its players, and therefore got a lot of blowback. So if Palworld is attempting to make satire, they are failing to make that satire. That's not to say that there isn't satire to be made here, but I don't think Palworld is actually doing it. Looking at this trailer, you might feel like this looks like a game that's inspired by a lot of different games from a gameplay perspective, from Pokemon and from Ark Survival, and looks like there's some Elden Ring in there, and some third-person shooter, and looks, is that some Zelda? And honestly, I think that's pretty awesome. I think some of the greatest games in the history of the medium have come from the fusion of different genres. And I don't think there's anything wrong with putting a bunch of things together in a blender, stirring them up, adding your own extra little spice, and making that be the basis of your game. And that's what I think, from a gameplay perspective, is largely going on here. That being said, again, I feel the trailer is overemphasizing one particular aspect of that, the Pokemon part, at the expense of the rest of the gameplay, and to some degree misleading their potential audience as a result. So from a gameplay perspective, is Palworld derivative of other games? I mean, sure, but to some degree, all games can be painted with that brush, and honestly, I think there are often cases where AAA games are trying too hard not to be painted with that brush, and as a result, end up throwing away a lot of work time after time. So there is good things here where there is a lesson to be learned about taking what you already know and putting several different things you already know work together into something greater than the sum of its parts. So if I applaud them for taking inspiration from a lot of different places when it comes to their gameplay, do I feel the same way about their art? And I don't. I feel that they cross the line on their art direction, specifically when it comes to the pals. I think they are too close to their inspiration, Pokemon. I think they are deliberately evoking Pokemon in their marketing material in an attempt to be misleading. So let's talk about why I'm not planning to buy this game. Some of this is just personal taste. Some of this is a bit more than that from my perspective. So this is a game in early access. It is definitely not yet done. I'm not looking to pick up any more early access games at the moment. It requires a certain degree of commitment that I'm not really prepared to put towards this kind of game at the moment. For that matter, I'm not really looking to pick up another survival builder at the moment at all. I'm not a huge fan of the inconsistency of art direction that is in this game. So you have very anime-inspired, cartoony pals, Pokemon, but then you have very realistic-looking guns. That isn't a requirement. They could make the guns fit more in the style of the Pokemon. I don't like that style. It's a choice, or perhaps not a choice. It could be done for ease of development reasons, but it is a choice that they have made that I do not care for. For me, the place where it crosses the line is that I feel like their marketing material is being somewhat misleading. They are very strongly evoking Pokemon, the world of Pokemon, the setting, the feel of Pokemon in their marketing. They have Team Rocket character in the trailer. That's where it crosses the line from my perspective into being misleading, because that's ultimately not really the game that they're making. So it's emotionally evoking something that is ultimately different than what they're delivering. On the gameplay side, I'm actually much more on board with what Palworld is doing. They are being inspired by a bunch of different things. You see aspects of Zelda and Elden Ring and Ark Survival and Pokemon mixed together and blended together in interesting ways. And I think that's cool. And I think, honestly, there's a lot of things to be excited about with this game, because it, like BG3, is laying bare this fidelity death cult that AAA has gotten itself into. It is garnering lots of attention. It is, despite being not the most visually impressive thing ever created, despite being inconsistent in its art style, despite being a blend of a bunch of different things. It's not breaking a ton of new ground. It's a fusion cuisine. It's blending things that already exist. And that is awesome. So while I am not on board with the Pokemon inspiration, I think there is a lot of stuff to be complimentary of with this game, and hopefully things that the AAA space can take a few lessons away from. So what's Nintendo going to do about this? Are they going to end up suing Pocketpair and saying that this is violating their copyright or violating their trademark? I don't expect they will. I suspect Nintendo's lawyers are telling them that's a case they probably don't win. That being said, if they can prove that there are models that were directly stolen from their games to be used in Palworld, then absolutely, there will for sure be a lawsuit, and Pocketpair will probably lose that lawsuit. But just because there isn't a lawsuit doesn't mean Nintendo isn't angry about this situation. I'm hearing rumors that voice actors are being told, don't work with Pocketpair because you will be blacklisted forever from Nintendo. Is that true? I don't know, but it would definitely fit with Nintendo's reputation of not playing around when it comes to this kind of stuff. Certainly, Nintendo would be well within their rights to prevent Palworld from appearing on the Switch, so wouldn't be surprised if we never see this game on the Switch. That being said, I think Nintendo needs to take a lesson from what is happening right now. You can look at this game and see that it's getting millions and millions of purchases for a game in early access that clearly has a ways to go. And why is that happening? Well, that's happening in large part because people are excited to see some new things come to Pokemon. They're excited to see a game that looks a lot like Pokemon explore new grounds, to bring new things to the setting. And even though it's technically not the Pokemon setting, it's so strongly evocative of that if you are someone that has only ever played Pokemon games, what are you seeing here? You're seeing a Pokemon game that adds building, that has more adult themes, that involves guns, that is doing things that you've never seen in a Pokemon game before. And that's pretty exciting. So I think Nintendo needs to take this as a warning that people are looking for some new stuff in their Pokemon games. The last couple Pokemon games haven't really explored any new ground because arguably they haven't really had to. But the success of this game is an indication that people are hungry for that. And the thing with being in first is if you don't pay attention to these kinds of warnings, you aren't guaranteed to hold on to that position. It is certainly possible for someone else to come along and make a cute monster collection and fighting game that dethrones Pokemon, that takes the #1 spot away from Nintendo. Do I expect that game to be Palworld? I don't, because Palworld's resources are limited enough that they probably can't really be in that fight long enough to actually win that fight. But this could be taken as a signal to someone else with deeper pockets that Pokemon isn't unassailable. And if you're willing to spend the money and explore new grounds and be something that people can flock to, that you can take a crack at dethroning Pokemon. And we may see a few attempts made by bigger companies with AAA money to make something that can actually legitimately dethrone Pokemon. If Nintendo ignores this signal and continues to let Pokemon largely stagnate in its genre. So should you buy this game? Honestly, that's up to you. If you're excited to watch a game being developed underneath you, this would be a great one to potentially monitor because it's gotten a lot of attention. They've got a lot of money coming in. There's a big opportunity for them to do some special things as they finish out development. If you want to signal strongly to Nintendo that you want more from your Pokemon games, buying this game is a signal. If you are looking at the trailer and the one part of the trailer you didn't really think too much about was the little building part, then I would say maybe give it a pass because that's what this game is, at least for now. Be aware that the trailer isn't fully representing the balance of gameplay within the game before you make that decision. TLDR, do I believe that Palworld is using AI? I don't think it's using AI, at least not to generate the in-game assets. Is it violating Nintendo's copyright? Again, probably not. There are a couple of suspiciously similar models that might be stolen, but I think they probably aren't. Is it parody? No. Is it satire? Probably not. There are some things that make me question that, but I still don't think it is. Do I think that they are being deliberately evocative of Pokemon in a way that I find goes too far? Yes, that's the place where that's where my line lives, is I think that they are being too evocative. They are flying too close to the sun in their styling, and I do not personally find that a comfortable place. Are they violating the law? Probably not. Do I find their gameplay overly derivative? Not at all. I think they are actually doing some interesting things in the survival builder space, and as the game gets closer and closer, hopefully they continue to do that. Nintendo needs to take this as a wake-up call and realize that Pokemon needs to have some evolution or risks taken within the genre, or they may find themselves no longer in first place in this space. I'm not going to buy this game for a variety of reasons, but the hardest one for me is that I feel like their marketing material is being deliberately misleading. Special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're new to this channel, we mostly talk about video game development and processes, so if you're interested, think about giving us a subscription. We have merchandise. I'm currently wearing the You May Now All Celebrate Briefly. There is a shelf below this video if you're interested in picking something up. Have you picked up Palworld? What do you think so far? Are you sitting on the fence? What will make you decide whether or not to give this game a try? How far is too far in terms of being inspired by gameplay or art or audio? Where's that line for you? Let's have a conversation about this down in the comments. It will be interesting to follow Palworld as it continues in through development. Maybe this will be a flash in the pan, and within a week's time, we won't even be talking about it anymore. But right now, it's pretty big in the discourse. There's something to be said for a game like this coming along and shaking up the conversation. I will see you again soon. Thank you.